digitaljamsessions.com.
Today we are joined by Sanj from Holoton. We've got Oliver back from Qwerty Films. Welcome back, Oliver. And we have with us James from Kooten. Hi guys, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thanks, Tanya.
Hello, yeah. Hi, thanks for having us.
I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. We all know who Oliver is already, but for those of us who haven't listened before, Oliver, please do explain once again who you are.
I'm the head of production and development at Qwerty Films, a feature film and television production company based in London. Basically my job is to find and develop new material to the point at which it can be financed and cast and go into production. And then when we're in production on certain work, to weigh in when I can and help out with getting things done. Whether it's budgeting or scheduling or liaising with finances and sales agents and that kind of thing.
And just for the record, for anybody who doesn't know what Qwerty has released, just drop a few names for us in terms of titles.
We've done The Duchess with Keira Knightley. We did David O. Russell's film I Heart Huckabees. We did the comedy horror Severance, and more recently we've done Sweet Française, which is in cinemas at the moment, with Michelle Williams and Kristen Scott Thomas. And we're actually just in prep on a new film about the world's worst opera singer who sold out Carnegie Hall, which we're doing with Stephen Frears, Meryl Streep and Hugh Grant.
Wonderful, thank you. And Sanj, why don't you explain to us all about your rather illustrious history in AR and also tell us all about Tupac for the people who don't know who you are.
Okay, so my name's Sanj. I'm the experiential producer for a digital design agency called Holition. We were formed as a venture startup to explore and expand the role that technological innovation can play in communicating with today's new digital consumer. Basically, Holition is like a synthesis of luxury marketers, retail specialists, and cutting-edge leaders in 3D technology. Just a little bit about myself. So I basically initially started within the music industry. I was a budding singer in a rock band, and we used to get in the back of a transit van and go up and down the M1 in the UK and play to nobody in a lot of dives up and down the country. I did that for a long time and then sort of left that, ended up working within the music industry for a trade publication called Music Week. I was their digital commercial manager, and then when the recession hit, I left there, set up my own consultancy, and I started helping new businesses target the music industry contacts that I had. Initially, they were like new artists that were looking for like record deals or publishing deals, etc. But every now and again, I would meet like a technology business that was looking to target these music industry professionals, and that's where I stumbled onto a company called Musion, who at the time did holographic installations, did lots of stuff within the sector, but my big break was really being part of the team that delivered the hologram of Tupac at Coachella back in 2012. So from there, my life kind of changed dramatically. But within Musion, I started working with a lot of luxury brands. Delivered quite a few installations for luxury brands, mainly within the Chinese sector, as the sort of burgeoning luxury market was growing out there. But then I started to really focus on working with luxury brands, and I left there and joined Holition back in 2012. Been here for about 2.5 years. My role as the experiential producer is basically to work with the technology and design teams in-house and develop live digital experiences for the purpose of product launches or experiential events. We're very scientific as a business. We try to think about this new digital consumer and how their habits have evolved over the last sort of 15 years. And then through the resources that we have, we develop new sort of platforms or products, and then we take them out to market.
Okay, the only thing that I have managed to remember through all of that you've just explained to me is the fact that neither you nor Paul have mentioned to me that I have been pronouncing Holition wrong for the last I don't know how long. Thank you for that. Holition. Okay, I've been calling you Holoton, but it's all good. And James, why don't you explain to us about Kooten and the wonderful, awesome AR DJ, along with many of the other things that you do?
Absolutely. So Kooten is a specialist augmented reality company. We've kind of got two sides to what we do. One, we've got our own technology. that we've been developing since 2011. That's not publicly available, but hopefully will be very soon. But what we've generally done is use that technology to create augmented reality apps. So our take on augmented reality is very much the mobile experiences. So we've worked with brands like Captain Morgan's, done a really interesting campaign in New York. We've worked with the likes of BBC, DHL on their sponsorship of things like Formula E, Cirque du Soleil, and more recently, quite innovative app for Ford Mustang, the European launch. So we tend to, as I say, focus on the mobile space and develop our own technology. What I do as the client solutions director is focus predominantly on the advertising and marketing sector for now. I mean, I think that's where we're seeing a lot of movement. I think there's going to be a broader take up across commerce and industry, but right now that's our focus. And I work with creative agencies and brands to really figure out how AR can go beyond being a gimmick, can be used within the customer journey, whether that is at the front end, the media play, the more advertising, through experiential, or could it be a sales tool? Could it be something that we use to demonstrate a product or to show what some new furniture or a new floor, for example, would look like in your home? So that's what I spend most of my time doing, talking to brands and agencies to develop AR apps.
While we were waiting for James and Oliver to arrive, Sanji and I were having a little bit of a conversation, and we were talking about the future of wearables and kind of where we think that kind of the future of AR is going in terms of headsets and physical devices. And we talked very briefly about things like the Oculus Rift and the Sulon Cortex. And it'd be really interesting to perhaps hear your point of view on this, Oliver, actually, in terms of, we know that there is this desire for filmmaking and storytelling to become more interactive, but do you genuinely see a future for interactive film using things like an Oculus Rift or a Sulon Cortex?
Well, yeah, no, I think definitely that's going to happen. And I think essentially there's two reasons. One is that, of course, it's exciting, it's a new technology, it's a new way of experiencing the film, but also because, it allows film to do something that, for example, gaming has been doing for a very long time, which is to immediately associate the audience with the protagonist. There was someone was telling me a quite interesting story that they've been starting to use VR headsets in management training as these sort of empathy machines to show you. So, for example, to get these big bosses that to be a lower paid worker within the organisation, and then have a boss come over and start screaming at them and throw coffee in their face and that kind of thing. And
not so aggressive then.
Yeah, show them how awful that is. But then and that's something that happens, to a certain extent in gaming a lot, especially first person, things, but also, any kind of third person, you say, oh, I died, when you're playing it, rather than the character died. And film is all about, trying to get the audience to identify with the hero in the film. So, this is a sort of very, very direct shorthand kind of way of making that happen. So I think people are going to be very keen to use it.
And what's your take on this, Sanj, in terms of, do you think that there is a future for things like the Oculus Rift and the Sulon Cortex in terms of brand experiences?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a really interesting sort of seismic shift within that sector. VR's been around for a long time. One of the professors that's developing it in the UK is actually a good friend of Russell, who's our CTO, and he's been working on VR since 1992. And some of the things that he showed us are specifically to sort of focus on the psychology of someone within that experience, and how their kind of habits are reacting within that experience. The reality is that VR's been around for a long time. There's a lot of people that want it, because from a socially evolving point of view, people are really excited about it, and they understand that the benefits of it are far and wide. The only issue that we've had over the last sort of 3 or 4 decades is that there hasn't been any investment, and the technology hasn't really been up to scratch. However, that's changing. So, over the last year, obviously with Facebook purchasing Oculus Rift, the new Valve system that's coming out at the moment, Sony's Morpheus project, these products are now in the marketplace, and there's lots of development that's going in there at the moment, and that there'll be some really interesting findings that are going to happen over the next few years. However, we're still in a new space, and there's a lot of development that needs to go into that before it becomes something that's going to take over the world.
It's interesting there because you've mentioned a couple of different devices, and I think that there needs to be a real clarification here for anybody who's listening who's not deeply into this space, who doesn't understand the differences between what VR is versus what AR is, because I think what we're talking about there is a lot of headsets in the way of VR, but we have AR coming in the form of things like Microsoft HoloLens and Sulon Cortex, and I think it's possibly important to define what those differences are. Do you want to take a stab at that, Sanj?
This is a really big discussion. What is VR and what is AR? But just to sort of put it in layman's terms, AR stands for augmented reality, and what that means is we are augmenting an experience that seems real through a digital device, whether it's your mobile device or a screen on a wall or even a headset. That's kind of what the technology does. It augments your surroundings. What VR does, virtual reality, is a little bit different. We actually create a virtual environment within the digital space mainly through a headset. But there are other types of virtual reality that's being developed at the moment.
Thank you. That was a very, very concise explanation. Thank you, Sanj. So James, in the context of AR versus VR, obviously with mobile, you're working very specifically with AR. At this point in time, what would you say are the most significant developments or changes that are happening within this space? Because obviously there's a lot going on with smartphone technology in terms of what the native devices can do and how much further we can push these things. What do you think is kind of the next interesting feature of development we're going to see happen?
I mean, you're absolutely right to make that distinction between VR and AR, because I think there's a lot of confusion. Whilst we focus more on the AR side, a lot of the work we do is mobile based, but we also step into virtual reality. So, for example, the work we did with BBC was using a mobile device's gyro to look around Broadcasting House. That's a completely virtual experience that the user's having. So we're seeing quite a lot of interest in virtual reality on mobile. So that kind of sits more with augmented reality because it's mobile technology. So then you look at the distinction, rather than being between AR and VR, it becomes about the device. So is it a headset or is it mobile? You then get into the situation of who's got a headset, who's got a mobile device. So you then start to have interesting discussions about the device in the context of the user. And I think for virtual reality, it's going to have a hard time breaking out of its core audience, which is gamers. And I was really surprised to see the new Magic Leap demo video, which was a first-person shooter game. And they talked about cinematic reality. You kind of thought this was going to be more about entertainment and film, but they've kind of gone right back to the core audience of gaming. So I think that's the direction that VR is going to stay in for a while. For the kind of brand and the marketers that we tend to deal with, it makes more sense to use augmented reality. It makes more sense to use a mobile device, be it a smartphone or a tablet. But where VR does have a role to play is in experiential. For example, I was in Waterloo back end of last year. I think it was Centre Parks had a really nice installation. You could go in and put the headset on and see what it was like to be in Centre Parks. So we're seeing interest in that area, but we also think there's going to be safety concerns. Would you want a VR headset in the back of a taxi where you could put it on and experience your next summer holiday? perhaps slight safety concerns with that. So I think it's an interesting area, as the guy said. It's definitely emerging and evolving. It's definitely hot right now. But I think that we're going to see VR stay within the gaming industry for a while, and a lot of movements on mobile devices for both AR and some VR experiences as well.
It's interesting, actually. This brings me to two specific things that I kind of want to bring up. The first is in terms of wearables and where we think wearables fits into this ecosystem, because obviously we have things like the new iWatch and what have you, and all these different wrist-worn devices that are kind of starting to emerge this year. But the other kind of thing that I want to throw in the mix as well is how we feel about experiential kind of progression with things like I don't know if you guys heard about the aeroplane, that somebody was suggesting an aeroplane where there are no windows, but all the surfaces are actually piping in video from the external of the aircraft, so it feels like you're literally flying through the clouds.
Yeah.
So do we think that there is a way forward for these very experiential experiences using what some might term as virtual reality or augmented reality, in as much as floating through the clouds when one is inside an aeroplane is somewhat of a virtual reality experience?
It's a really interesting point, and it kind of highlights a really important factor with all of these new technologies that are coming into the space at the moment, and that's really down to the consumer. What's in it for them. We always, whenever we're developing a digital application, we always go back to the consumer and think about what's in it for me. Why would someone go in a plane and have that experience? Now, some people would for X, some people wouldn't for Y, and that's what the debate needs to be about. There's all types of fantastic technology at the moment. There's all types of fantastic opportunities for technology to hit the consumer space, but the ultimate goal is how is that going to affect the consumer? How is it going to make their life worthwhile? And I think that's the problem that Google Glass had before it went to launch, was that people were too focused on the technology and they weren't really focused on the experience, and that's where it kind of fell apart. So to answer your question with regards to being in a plane covered in screens, personally that's not of interest to me, but to someone else it may be.
Okay.
I think from my perspective, it is about creating amazing experiences, and the technology now does it make that possible. I think the challenge is the people tasked with coming up with these experiences, whether it's directly from a brand or an organization or their creative agency, their mobile agency. It's the people that are coming up with these ideas have to really understand the technology and what it's capable of. So because this is all really quite new, it's taking a while for those people to actually understand the capabilities. And once that is better understood, there will be these ideas that come forward, whether it's an aeroplane or some other experiential execution. I think we will start to see more. It will start to snowball, because the more experiences that are out there, the more people talk about them, the more it's going to inspire new and more exciting ideas. But it does have to be meaningful, either something that's fun and engaging or something that delivers some utility. So I think we need to move beyond gimmicks, but it's more about imagination now and innovation, I think.
It's interesting there that you said about moving beyond gimmicks. And I'd be interested to hear your take on this, Oliver, because I think one of the things that's quite interesting is this notion of kind of taking the next step with filmmaking and actually having this combination of kind of live theatre, experiential, through the use of either AR or VR. But that still feels very gimmicky. It still feels like somebody needs to actually sit down and really think about what is the potential, the true potential for something like AR or VR in the filmmaking experience, and whether or not that is something that's justifiable in the context of the creative process. I mean, what's your view on that, Oliver?
Well, yes, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, as you were both saying, the gimmickiness is something that it needs to get over. I mean, you can see that in 3D films, for example, which obviously over the last 5, 6, 7 years or so have had a massive emergence, and now, are a huge presence within the theatrical market. But 3D films are 100 years old. That's when they were first tested on audiences in 1915. So you don't know how long it's going to be until these technologies are fluid enough to do storytelling in the way that we understand it. Having said that, of course, what we also don't know is how those technologies are going to affect the storytelling, and that's again something that film has always had to deal with. Quite famously in Public Enemy, the James Cagney film, James Cagney was not been getting leading roles because his machine gun delivery was so difficult to pick up on the early sound recording equipment. But just as they were doing Public Enemy, or just before, some new sound equipment was developed, and they could pick him up more clearly, and he became the main role. So who knows? And I think we were talking last time about some of those immersive theatre experiences and crossover you could do, and certainly augmented reality coming into theatre experiences, but also, just virtual reality. If you found site-specific movie making effectively, you could certainly do. Everyone's, was very aware of the Saving Private Ryan, D-Day sequence, which is, possibly the best, war, certainly the Second World War experiential piece of cinema ever made, that had stunning below the line work on every level that made it this entirely immersive experience. Well, in theory, you could, in about 10 years, probably you could go to those beaches and put on an Oculus Rift and experience it, whether you'd want to. I don't know, but but then, again, that is still in the sort of gimmick range, isn't it? That's not actually a film. That's an experience. So without wanting to sound like a broken record, it does again come down to story. So yes, I think that fluidity of the technology and then its interaction with its effect on narrative is going to be key, and it's quite difficult to predict how long that will take.
You mentioned there about this notion of being somewhere and kind of putting on the device, so putting on the glasses or the thing. And I wonder, Sanji, what your take on this is in terms of, do we think that there needs to be a kind of a next progression step away from something that is a barrier to entry? So whether it is, the Google Glass that nobody wanted to wear because it was quite embarrassing, or whatever, the big Oculus Rift headset, which you practically break your neck when you put one of those things on your head because it's so heavy. Is there a need, do we think, for perhaps progressing into more transparent hardware that really isn't causing that barrier to entry? Is that perhaps when we'll see this balance shift into more public consumerism?
It's a very interesting question, and I don't think there's a definitive answer. However, I think I think Oliver hit the nail on the head when he said that the most important thing, whatever platform is being used, it is the story, and that's what has to be the compelling nature of the experience. There are problems with the technology at the moment. A few of those. One is, that it's bulky. Two, does it look right?
A couple of things for me on this one. If I look at the future of wearables, I look quite far out, and I say one day we will have augmented reality contact lenses and we will have implants. So if that's the future, it's just a question of how quickly we're going to get there. Devices will get smaller. They will get prettier if we want them to get prettier. So I don't have any doubt that the technology will evolve in that direction. So that's just an inevitability from my perspective. Picking up Oliver's point, I think telepresence is an interesting area for virtual reality. It may be a theatre production, but you can experience it at home while it's being performed live, for example. And with the headset on, you're viewing that in a full 360. I know last year Topshop did that for London Fashion Week. There's talk of I think some basketball games on in the NBA selling virtual tickets. So rather than just watching it on TV, you put your headset on and it's like you're in the stadium. I know that the Royal Shakespeare Company are experimenting with some of these more interactive experiences where you can change your position and watch the same performance from 3 or 4 different places on the stage. So telepresence, I think, for live and captured events, I think is a really, really interesting area. So that's my take. The future of wearables is just getting smaller, and VR has so many different angles and aspects it can go in.
Yeah, so just going back to what Oliver said, that the narrative has to be paramount when delivering technology to the consumers. There's all sorts of technology that's out there, but none of it is the solution. It's really down to the story. The trouble we're having at the moment is a lot of our clients have been given a kind of a technology budget or an innovation budget, and a lot of them don't know what to do with it, and they've seen some of the things that happened in the past, and they're like, I like that, I want to deliver that, but they don't understand why they need to deliver it. Ultimately, obviously, they're looking for more sales, or they're looking to drive PR. But the problem we're having at the moment is none of these people are focusing on the story or the narrative or what it is that compels someone to buy a product or to be associated with a brand. And that's what we need to sort of come back to, focus on that, and then utilize the right technology to help people engage with the brands in the right way.
Awesome. Thank you, Sanj. So in closing, I think the thing that's interesting to understand here is what the future of these landscapes looks like. Talking about things like wearables just becoming smaller, in terms of what James was talking about there, and really focusing on story first from Sanji's point of view. I'd just like to know from each of you what you see as the big game changer or the thing that needs to change most significantly in order for this to become something that is very much a mainstream kind of consumerism kind of situation. So maybe if we start with Oliver.
Great, thanks.
You're amongst geeks here. It's all good.
Well, I mean, I think, there's something interesting, like we're talking about wearability and that kind of thing. At the moment, I really struggle with 3D in the cinema often because it's calibrated quite poorly unless you're at certain screens in London and this, that and the other. And like I wear glasses, so, I have to kind of wear 2 sets of glasses, and this, that and the other. But certain films like, Godzilla, I will grin and bear it because I want to see what that's like. But I think at the moment the idea that when going to the cinema and that the ritual of that is at the moment tied in in 3D with their glasses system. So you go to the cinema, they give you their glasses, you put them on, whatever. Whereas if we're in a situation where everyone's wearing Google Glass or everyone's got Oculus Rift on all the time, or at least most of the time, in the same way that people mostly have their phones out or at least on them all the time, then possibly it's that kind of day-to-day aspect that will affect how easy it is to do this, because of course, as we're saying, there's so many different products out there. So are they all going to be cross-compatible? What kind of equipment are say exhibitors going to need? Are they going to have to provide glasses or headsets in the same way that they do now, or are they going to be able to tap in like drive-in movies now? You tune your radio to the right frequency. That's rather than them having massive amps. So I think that's quite insignificant.
Okay, and what about you, James? What do you think?
For me, the future, I see a few things happening actually. First of all, people need to catch up with the current technology, what technology is currently able to do. As I was really alluding to before, the technology can do an awful lot more than people are really using it for at the moment. And we're developing our technology to move away from a lot of AR experiences that you need a printed marker. You've got to kind of point it at something. You've got to go and put something on the floor. I mentioned Ford Mustang. We've worked really hard to develop a technology that allows you, without a marker, to place a life-size car on your driveway and to be able to move it, to be able to change the color, to get the roof down, to change the wheels. That's evolving the technology that allows people to create these kind of experiences. So one, I think the technology is still evolving, but people are catching up with what it can do. And I think that will still be the advertising and marketing industry that will kind of lead that. They will move away from gimmicks, doing something purely for the wow factor, and because that will just get boring. So there will be more of these mobile moments, really amazing experiences from media and advertising through to more functional sales tools. But the next move is then into commerce. Yes, it was some fun for some brands and they've done some interesting things, but how do the rest of the people use it? And we're starting to have these conversations with big high-tech manufacturers. How can they use augmented reality to help manufacturing jet fighters, for example? How can we use the technology to help them maintain and fix an aircraft, for example? We're seeing the use of augmented reality and virtual reality in training. Training detectives to investigate a crime scene, for example. So that for me is where I see things moving, technology moving forward, catching up, and then lots more great experiences. Then that filtering down into more applications across commerce. And that's really when it's going to kind of go mainstream, I think.
Okay, and what about you, Sanji? What's your thoughts?
Well, for me, I believe that the tech bubble in Silicon Valley is going to burst this year. And that's going to have a detrimental effect on the industry that we're working in at the moment. When I say burst, I mean that the level of investment that's been thrown into that sector is going to dramatically decrease. Which means that a lot of these businesses that have come out over the last sort of 15 years are going to have to learn how to adapt for them to survive. The future for Holition, so we're developing a lot of things at the moment. So one of the things that we're really focused on, and James kind of alluded to that with regards to Kooten, is markerless AR. So developing seamless experiences that where someone engages with something, whether it's a brand or whatever, without having to download something or to put on a marker, etc. So we've developed virtual try-ons, we've developed virtual color changing apparatus, whether it's makeup or clothing, through a mobile device or through AR cameras. The other thing as well, wearable tech. So people are really thinking about wearable tech at the moment, and at the moment it's very rational, very brash. How many beats is my heart pumped, or how many steps have I walked, which is fantastic, but it's not beautiful. We developed something with a lady called Lauren Boker, who runs a brand called The Unseen, and we built this dress that changes colours depending on what you're thinking. So it sounds a bit sort of bizarre, but you put on a headset, and through those thoughts, we manifest a myriad of colours on a dress. It's totally unwearable, but that's an artistic and beautiful avenue of wearable tech that we're developing. And then lastly, and this is quite an important thing, and this is outside of Holition and the companies that are talking here, Apple's investment in the iWatch and specifically within medical is an interesting step, as this will have like a big effect on pop culture. Apple being such a massive brand, worth so much money, breaking records all over the world with sales and the amount of people that are using it, have invested a lot of time and money in how the habits of people medically are going to be monitored through this device, the iWatch. Some people think it's intrusive, some people think it's exciting, but whatever it is, it's an interesting space, and that's going to have a big impact on tech in the near future.
I think you're completely right. I think it's a conversation for another time, because we could launch into a whole other conversation just on that. But what I will say is thank you guys for joining us today. I'm going to just very, very briefly, and again, correct me if I pronounce this incorrectly, please. But if you want to reach out to Sanji, it's Sanj Sarati on Twitter, or Holition, which is Holition, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. I got it right. If you want to reach out to Kooten, it's Kooten AR on Twitter. And if you want to reach out to Oliver, it's at Oliver Kassman. That's Kassman. And remember, if you enjoyed listening to this session, then remember to subscribe at digitaljamsessions.com. digitaljamsessions.com